So Tessa Blanchard won the Impact title tonight at the pay-per-view. I saw the NXT TakeOver UK show. I did not see the Impact pay-per-view, so how was the show?
The Impact show? I guess overall, because of the Tessa Blanchard match, I would say it was pretty much of an upbeat show. I mean, Tessa Blanchard, for everything that went down all day, they never made mention of it on the air. She did make mention. Well, I think there was maybe a comment. There may have been like one comment. She did kind of reference it, or, she referenced it without saying anything on the post-match. The crowd was pretty much behind her. I mean, enough to where you didn't notice that anyone that was booing her whatsoever, like nobody. She was the total babyface in the match. When she did give her speech at the end and everyone's doing, you deserve it, you deserve it, you could hear 3 or 4 people trying to catcall, but they were pretty much shouted down on the situation. She could have, that it was a bad day for her. I don't think that it got in the way of her wrestling. I mean, she was enough of the, put it this way. There's a reason Tessa Blanchard's been an Impact and she's not in WWE, because Tessa Blanchard is, as pure talent, is probably the most talented American female wrestler, of all of them. Of all of them, more than Sasha, she's more than Sasha Banks, more than Charlotte Flair, more than Becky Lynch. I mean, as far as pure talent, she's ahead of all of them. And she's, she did not get a developmental deal there because attitude issues, I guess is how you would put it. And she ended up in Impact, and they recognized very quickly. I remember the thing, I was kind of told, Scott D'Amore, when they saw her at first, I remember one of the matches, I don't remember which one, but it was, this is when she was going for the women's title, the Knockouts title. And it was like, man, she wrestles, I wrote it in one of the reports, it's like, she wrestles like a Japanese guy, which I meant as a compliment. She's so aggressive, hard hitting, her stuff looks very realistic. I mean, it's just a level of an incredible intensity, like, that feeling of real, as much as you're going to have with pro wrestling. Then they, embarked on this long storyline that was going to culminate tonight. I mean, I went through the whole thing of why and how it took so long and why it took so long and everything like that. But the reason they knew they had her was because of the fact that other people, as talented as she was and is, a lot of people wanted to steer clear of her for all the reasons that came out. And she had a lot of enemies, and, for whatever, she made a tweet, and I guess that, like, whatever the deal was, it inflamed a lot of people from her past, and they all came out. And, there's nobody in Impact who didn't know those stories. They weren't going to change. I mean, I guess they could have, but I didn't expect that they would change any plans because of it, because in a sense that would be very hypocritical, because all that anyway. So it's like, that's the decision that you've made. You're going all the way with this person, and you spent all this time going in that direction, and the day it happens, you got a choice. Do you just say screw it, or you just say this is our plans, we're going to do it? If it was something that they didn't know and blindsided them, or something that they thought was really, again, also you've got D'Amore and Don Callis, who've been around the wrestling business for a long, long time. I think that if you have newer people in the wrestling business, they might have a different attitude, but when you've got people who've been in the wrestling business from the old school, this stuff is not going to affect them. I mean, that's just how it is. They're not going to go in there and be shocked because, number one, they know it, and number two, they've seen a million times worse. So they made that call. She could have, I suppose it would have been, she could have apologized rather than say, what she said. it would have it would have been like, to me that would make it better. Okay. But I also know that on Twitter, there's no win. Apologizing doesn't make it better. Apologizing only makes it worse. That's the reality. It does not affect me, because I will always apologize if I think I'm wrong and have no compunction about it. But if I was giving advice to someone on business, I would say screw business and do what you think is right and do the right thing. But when it comes to business, the fact is that it does make it worse. I've seen it, and everyone on Twitter knows it. That's why you don't see a lot of apologies on Twitter when these things happen, because the reality is that that's what you're taught. I was told, why? Never apologize. And it's like, I don't care about business. It's like, I'm going to do the right thing. But, and I don't know what the company, again, I don't know if the company told her what to or not to do. I don't know. Or she did it all on her own. If the company would have forced her to apologize, she would have had to, and obviously they did not. So they went through the plans. As far as the match, super match, considering, from a story standpoint, it was awesome. She sold most of the way. Sami Callihan was the most vile, horrible, contemptible heel that you could ever have. The crowd, the crowd was hating him. They were wanting her to win. They went over 20 minutes. He did everything in the world, including spitting on her. He was the most vile, horrible, contemptible heel. He pile drove her a couple times. She gave the Magnum, I think it ended up being 4 times, and he survived all of them. And eventually, at the end, he was about to hit her with brass knucks. She used a low blow on him, and she got the pin. And that was, she basically, let me see, she did a Canadian Destroyer. She did a Canadian Destroyer, second Canadian Destroyer off the ropes. This is after the low blow. And then she did a hammerlock DDT and got the pin in almost 24 minutes. And, like I said, as a storytelling match, it was really, really good. It was for what it should have been. It was excellent. The show itself, it was an Impact pay-per-view. There was some good, there was some bad. There was some pretty bad in the show, and some decent. When you see other top promotions, you really see the difference with Impact in a lot of ways. But Callihan and Tessa was strong. Like Ken Shamrock and Madman Fulton was pretty bad. Ace Austin and Trey Miguel is the storyline where Ace Austin's after Trey Miguel's mom, and Trey Miguel's playing it pretty well. Ace Austin's actually a pretty good heel. It was an X Division title match. It's that X Division style. It's not like a great version of it. It's young guys doing it that are on the way up, that have talent, and will probably get better in time. And they were fine. They were good. Taya retained the women's title in a 3-way against Jordynne Grace and ODP. Same 3-way finish you always see. Johnny Bravo distracted the ref. Jordynne Grace did the Grace driver on ODB. Taya stole, threw Jordynne Grace out of the ring, stole the pin. It was not a good match. Rob Van Dam and Brian Cage was a weird match. Brian Cage was bleeding like crazy from the mouth. Obviously, it was gimmicked because they just kind of stopped the match, and that was it. And then Daga took over, and that was it for Brian Cage. Rob Van Dam and Daga. Rob Van Dam won with a frog splash. The Rob Van Dam Cage match was kind of a nothing. Rob, for his age, he was doing all of his stuff. It wasn't really that interesting of a match. It was just basically Rob beating up on Cage for a couple minutes, then Rob beating up on Daga for a couple minutes, and they were. I don't know. Rob and Cage wasn't good. Rob and Daga was okay. Eddie Edwards and Michael Elgin was a hell of a match. Michael Elgin did the buckle bomb, went for the Elgin bomb. Eddie Edwards turned it into a Toyota roll, got the pin. Long match, very, very physical. Really a great pro wrestling match. I would say, it's very Japanese style in a lot of ways. Elgin works Japanese style. Eddie Edwards knows how to work that style. He's really good at it as well. Eddie Edwards was great in Noah, the last couple of years. And, just excellent match. Moose and Rhino was okay, fine. No DQ match. Moose won with a low blow and a spear. Normal. And then they had a tag team match. Ethan Page and Josh Alexander against Willie Mack in a handicap match because Rich Swann sprained his ankle on Friday night in San Antonio, and they did a thing backstage with the doctor, and the doctor would not allow him to come out. So, that was the idea that, he wasn't even out there because he was out there. He would have to interfere as Willie Mack was basically getting double teamed the whole time. And, it was effective. It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad at all. Willie Mack's a good worker. Alexander and Page are a good team. Alexander pinned him. It was a torture rack into a spine buster, double team move by Alexander and Page, and Alexander pinned Willie Mack to retain the tag team titles. So overall, I think that to me, the main event in Elgin Edwards made it a reasonably good show. I mean, not a great show by any means, and like I said, there was plenty that wasn't so good also.
Tessa Blanchard ended up with the Impact World Championship, the first woman to win the Men's World Championship for any nationally televised organization in the United States. So that was last night as well, and she had a very, very busy weekend. We could tell you about that. So those are the big show stories here today. We got some big changes coming to Ring of Honor. We have got Marty Scurll re-signing with the company, and he's also joining the booking team. We'll tell you how that's all going to shake out. And obviously, we've got a Ring of Honor NWA working agreement starting back up, as we had NWA stars on Ring of Honor. And, of course, Marty Scurll is on the NWA Power Show as well. So there is that. Saudi Arabia. WWE in Saudi Arabia. We don't know the exact date for sure, but it appears to be February 27th. And there's also been a February 20th date bandied about, but I believe it's going to be the 27th. And it looks like they're going back to Saudi Arabia. And if you recall, when the last Saudi Arabia show occurred, there were a lot of wrestlers who were claiming they were never going to go back. And my guess is that they're all going to go back. But that looks like the next date, which is about a month and a half away from WrestleMania. So these Saudi shows are always WrestleMania caliber shows because it's the biggest money show that they do. So it'll be interesting to see what the matches are for Saudi Arabia and what the matches are for WrestleMania. They got to build up both largely at the same time. Back in a minute to talk about all of this. Wrestling Observer Live. Back in the show, Bryan Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. Mike Sempervive, also of WrestlingObserver.com. A controversial weekend for Tessa Blanchard ended with her winning Impact Wrestling's World Championship at last night's Hard to Kill pay-per-view. Blanchard won the Impact World title, defeating Sami Callihan in the main event of the show. Finishing sequence saw her hit 2 Canadian Destroyers and a Hammerlock DDT to win the title. I remember back in the day when one guy did the Canadian Destroyer. Now everybody does it, including Piper Niven on the UK show. And, I mean, I shouldn't say including Piper Niven, because, I mean, we've had Ricky Morton do the Canadian
Dustin
Destroyer.
Rhodes.
Dustin is doing it as part of his comeback now, of all things.
On the apron.
Blanchard gave a speech to the crowd after the show went off the air earlier in the weekend. Prior to winning the World Championship, the first woman to win the Men's World Championship in a major U.S. organization with national television. She tweeted, "Hey, women, try supporting one another. Cool things happen." So, momentarily, I guess it was, it started with Allison Kay. Allison Kay sent out a tweet that says, "Remember when you spat in a black woman's face and called her the N-word in Japan? Was that supporting women?" The audacity of this tweet. Tessa then responded, "Not true. That's my statement, and the most attention I will give it because of how actually ridiculous it is." Chelsea Green then tweeted, "You've constantly put down, bullied, and belittled countless female coworkers, including me. Is that support?" Blanchard then responded, "I have never been anything but kind to you. I've dealt with mean girls since I started. I'm not saying I'm a saint, but I've had my ups and downs. I've made silly decisions such as life. You have zero merit in your comments. Instead, putting me down here for a little clout, you've got my number." La Rosa Negra then wrote, "Sienna and Chelsea Green, thank you so much. That story, yes, that happened in Japan 2017. Tessa Blanchard does not remember it. Can I? I'm not a mean girl with my coworkers around the world. Be kind. Hashtag racist is not ridiculous. It's a sickness." She is the wrestler that Blanchard allegedly spat on and called the N-word. Then Shanna wrote in support of La Rosa Negra, "Blanchard did more nasty stuff in Japan. Never forget. Practice what you preach, sweetheart. I stand by," I guess, whatever her Twitter handle is here. "She's a loving, fun person who would never disrespect anybody. Much love to you, Rosa." And then more jumped in as well. All day long, there were people going after Tessa Blanchard. And Tessa did her statement, and that's all she did. And then she won the title, and then she did a speech about how mentally strong she was. So this was quite the weekend for her, and all I can tell you is I wasn't there in Japan. I don't know what happened, but a lot of people came out on Twitter saying that it did happen, and it is no mystery that Tessa Blanchard was not signed to a lot of different places because of attitude issues. And how deep those attitude issues went, how much those promotions knew about whatever, I don't know. I just know that as far as in-ring talented female wrestlers, she is one of the best in this entire country. And she could not get a developmental deal with WWE, and she didn't end up in a lot of other places as well. And they ended up signing her to Impact Wrestling, and it's not like nobody there knew all of these stories. It's not like there weren't people working there that had witnessed stories, but they decided that we have the best working American female wrestler, and we're going to go all the way with her. And they did. And that's the story.
It is. Have you had a chance to see the match yet? I know you hadn't as of last night with
I
Dave
have not
doing
seen the
show.
match.
I've seen it. Impact is truly the land of the misfit toys, isn't it? I know this is probably supposed to be a great crowning achievement for Tessa. It really just made me think more, and I didn't have a chance to see the whole show, so take this for what it's worth. You know, I didn't get a chance to see the shows that rolled along in context, but just watching the main event, more than anything, I was just kind of stuck with the fact that Sami Callihan's been the world champion there, and now he's lost it to Tessa Blanchard. The match wasn't really that good. It was a garbage match. It wasn't bad. It wasn't, the typical overcomer. Sami Callihan is gross and does a lot of gross things, and he had it on 11 yesterday, as well he should have, with Tessa Blanchard doing everything he could to just be the slimiest, worst guy in that ring he could be, and Tessa, of course, fighting back out of all of it. But there is still a level, even with what we know about fighters and women competitors and athletes and your Kayla Harrisons of the world and your Ronda Rouseys and Amanda Nunez's or whoever you want to put, even though we know how great some of them could be, this match was almost a bridge too far, as far as he's laying in so much punishment at times. It's like, really, dude, what's the matter with you? Because at this point, it's like, any world champion anywhere. In theory, if I'm supposed to be looking at this as a world champion, an epic world championship moment, even though it's got Sami Callihan and Tessa Blanchard in it, it ain't cutting it for me. And it didn't do it for me. It was an okay match. I know the story they were trying to tell, and I'm sure to the fan base that it was going after, the people that were there seemed to really be into it. But I think as you expand out of the very small base that is looking at this. I don't think people are looking at it with kind eyes. And I think with what the weekend had and what it entailed for Tessa Blanchard, horrible timing for Impact indeed, certainly, but it just is not going to make anything any more flowery about it either. I mean, there were just no good tidings at all to me about last night's match, including her post-match promo, which really, they kept her quiet all weekend long doing media. For her to say anything afterwards except for, forget about even saying I'm sorry, just don't say anything at all, probably would have been the best case. To me, like everything about this weekend just kind of buried Tessa and Impact further. I could be wrong, but I don't know.
Impact, they experiment a little bit. Obviously with Tessa Blanchard and the world title, but middle-aged Rob Van Dam. Not always the most tasteful thing, but who would have guessed? If you would have told me with Rhino and Rob Van Dam when they turned that Rob Van Dam would be the heel and he'd really be adapting to this whole midlife crisis, perverted Rob Van Dam, creepy middle-aged guy, Rob Van Dam, I wouldn't have guessed it. And he's pulling it off. Granted, he got kicked off Twitch, but look, he's still pulling it off. You know who else no one really doesn't talk about enough? Taya Valkyrie. I think she's great. She's like, I don't know. She's a larger, imposing figure, but she still has this sexy, cool look, and she's got this attitude, and she dresses cool, and she's paid her dues as well. I love Taya Valkyrie on Impact. Love Falaba. He's great. And of course, Johnny Swinger, my guilty pleasure. He's hilarious.
Impact Wrestling is going to be getting into the Empty Arena televised wrestling game. They will be taping 2 months of programming over 3 days this week. Tommy Dreamer revealed the news on Busted Open Radio Tuesday. He said he drove 700 miles to the location, which our Dave Meltzer confirmed as Nashville, Tennessee. He is also reporting several key talents will not be in attendance, but did not have a full list as of right now. Mike Johnson reported there are plans to move ahead with the Rebellion pay-per-view in some form, perhaps packaged as an access special or a regular Impact episode instead. Like WWE in Florida, it is unclear how Impact Wrestling is working around Tennessee's 2-week safer at-home order, which began last week. Similar to Florida and other states, only businesses deemed essential are allowed to remain open. I live a 5-minute walk from an elementary school, and there's a covered area with a wall, and I try to take my daughter there so that we could just throw a ball against the wall. There's nobody else there. We're literally the only people there. We're just bouncing a ball off the wall at the elementary school. And a security guy drove up and said that we couldn't play ball there. Meanwhile, somehow, these wrestling events are taking place in Florida and Tennessee with large crews. I have absolutely no idea how. An Impact.
Okay, so Impact yesterday, they did on the show, they did a video talking about their Slammiversary show on July the 18th, which I guess is going to be a Saturday night pay-per-view. Well, it is going to be Saturday night pay-per-view. And it was like a news report, and the news report was about all the firings in WWE. And then they showed different people, Drake Maverick, and they showed a Bulgarian flag because they actually don't have footage of Rusev, and they showed Gallows and Anderson and EC3 and Kurt Hawkins and a bunch of guys. Actually, I should give every name. Hold on just a second. Eric Young, Mike Bennett, Maria. So those people. And the implication was, if you watched it, people thought that they were going to be on that show. They never said that. They just showed pictures of them in a quick vignette. Obviously, Drake Maverick is not going to be on that show. And I would presume that they have spoken to some of those people, maybe all of them. But It's not like they're going to be there. And I've seen people go, oh my God, none of these guys are going to AEW. And it's very premature to say that. Or none of these guys are going to New Japan, which is extremely premature to say that. Now Slammiversary is July 18th, and all of those people that I've mentioned, other than Drake Maverick, are available on, I think it's July 15th. I could be off by a day, but they're definitely going to be available by July the 18th. So I'm sure that I'm sure Impact will try very hard to get some of these people. And if you're looking at what makes sense, I would say that they would have a shot at a lot of them, because I don't see, number one, if AEW is the prime place to go. But, Ring of Honor is going to spend money for somebody.
Well, I think if the deal is up the 15th and the date is the 18th, I mean, I would be stunned if a number of them were not willing to at least show up for a one-night appearance at Slamboree for a payoff, and then perhaps go somewhere afterwards.
Yeah, that's possible too. You could do a one-day thing.
I don't necessarily think that showing up there means you have to sign a 3-year deal with Impact. Right.
And there's also the situation where it could be, even though it's a weird, the politics are very weird, because when it comes to like New Japan, they really don't want their guys to go to Impact. I mean, if they did, I think Elgin would probably have, I don't know. Elgin had his reasons for leaving, but, they haven't been keen on their contracted talent working for Impact. They want their contracted talent working for Ring of Honor. Other than, Moxley and Jericho, who obviously are going to be with AEW, but they still use them. It's the politics are very, they're weird. So, but I don't know how that's all going to play out, but I do expect, New Japan is a weird thing, because right now, New Japan obviously is not in a position to hire anybody new. They're trying to take care of the people that are already there, but that's not going to last forever. And, once they get running, and once they probably, I think the idea, they may have to rebuild their cash reserves, because they lost out on a ton of money these last couple of months that they were expecting and budgeting. But once that gets back to, normal, and everything's, and who knows when that's going to be. At that point, I'm sure that there's going to be people they're open for, but, that's the whole thing with the timing standpoint of the WWE releases. They released guys at a time when, the guys did not have the same opportunities to sign places and go places that they would have had at any other time in, modern history, because, everybody was down and people were not, nobody was really looking at hiring a lot of new guys, because you couldn't afford to. You don't have the revenue coming in at all. So, and the whole economic situation's different. So, but I would suspect at some point, some of these guys will be New Japan bound.
Impact Wrestling a few hours ago announced that Joey Ryan and Dave Christ have been fired, unsurprisingly, and Michael Elgin is currently suspended pending, I guess, a further investigation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Joey Ryan's pretty much done.
I may have missed something in the last hour, but the last time I checked, there were 16 allegations against Joey Ryan. 16!
Yeah, when you have that many, it's pretty hard to... I'll tell you, yeah, it's amazing to me that nothing had come out before now, which I guess tells you just how much, I guess, fear is the word that people had about speaking out, because it's one thing when it's one person and some, but when it's 16 people, it's pretty, with very, a lot of wide variety of stories, but none of them good.
Well, we should add that we know someone who knows someone, and suffice to say,
We always know someone who knows someone.
apparently there are other people who are not comfortable speaking right now. So the number,
About Joy Ryan?
yes, could be, who
Oh,
knows?
I wouldn't be surprised. You would think. I don't even want to think about what you would think because but you would think that someone with his gimmick, if anything, would be extra careful. But then again, who would think this way? I mean, this is really bad stuff. The idea that had gone on to this extent, and I mean, I know people who are like really good friends of Joey Ryan's, and to say they were stunned is an understatement. I mean, it's just, there's so many people in this business that are, just, I think everyone in the business is kind of like just emotionally exhausted. I don't even know if that's the right word, but just the whole last couple, 4 days or so has just been a horrible period of revelation. It's that I mean, you always know that there is some stuff going on as far as, but you think that it's pretty much. I mean, there's gonna be a lot of fooling around in the business. Okay, it's inherent with the business. Okay, but you always think that it's consensual. I mean, because you really don't hear much, and I do know that, like, some of the stories as far as, women who guys like came on too strongly. Yeah. I'm sure drunk guys and even not drunk guys, that's going to happen. And I'm not trying to minimize it, but that's not shocking to me. But the extent of some of this, is absolutely shocking to me. I mean, there's some stuff that's been around wrestling forever, and I'm sure that things like this have probably been in the business before and covered up with the idea that you don't expose and you don't harm the business and all that crap. But the idea that somebody could, again, like you say, 16, and there's, how many is there really, right? I mean, it's probably going to be more than that. And God knows what. And some of the stories are just like so bad. I don't even want to get into them, but Joey Ryan's gone, and I don't know that he appears to be the worst. And, I don't know that we'll be seeing him. I don't know how you come back from this one. I don't know how it went on this long. I don't know how. I guess in some cases, companies didn't know, but we also know in some cases companies did know, and some of them still brought him back. I mean, he was an independent star without a doubt, but he wasn't that big of a star, and that's not, and even being, if he was like Roman Reigns or Jericho or somebody like that, who was a really big star, that's no defense either. But it's just, the whole Joey Ryan thing just is really, it's just so sad every time you read a story. And again, when it's something like these stories, I feel so horrible for the business, for the women in the business. And like I said the other day, I believe that almost every woman in the business probably has a horror story. Some maybe not as bad, but I mean, I know, like...
Actually, believe it or not, I just saw a post from Deanna Parazzo who said, believe it or not, she had no experiences. So there is at least one.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Good for her.
She said she had been... I'll try and find it here as you keep going, but... Go ahead.
It's hard to... It's almost hard to believe. But... I mean, there's so many involving so many of the bigger names that don't want to say anything right now. I mean, the biggest names of the previous generation. And it's just really... God. I mean, the thing is the business needs a cleansing. A lot of these guys need to be gone. I mean, that's not even a question. And there's got to be some changes. I really think that when it comes to wrestling schools, I really think that, there should probably be, I don't know how you enforce it, but I really do think that wrestling schools should not be training anyone under the age of 18. I know that there's, people who were big, turned out to be great workers and all that. And there's UK wrestlers that started at 14, and by the time they were 20, they were great, and men and women both. But I just think that for the better good, I think that's one thing, and that's obviously not going to stop anything, because the reality is that the vast majority of these stories, I don't say the vast, but most of the stories do involve women that are over the age of 18. There are definitely, obviously, stories of much younger women involved too. Every story is different, but I mean that's one thing that I could think of. The other is that there needs to be a way for people to report it. But then you've got, I mean, it's such a freaking complicated issue, because, again, like with Joey Ryan, I can sit here and go like, there's just too many. In other cases, it's like, it's going to be one person's word against another. And what does that, you know what I mean? How do you, do that unless you have proof? And then in certain cases, we've seen like gimmick proof too, what appears to be gimmick proof or something, I mean, people can do stuff. Another thing, again, is, I don't know. I'm some of these stories, I just can't believe just the brazenness of some guys. I mean, dick pics and everything like this. I mean, I know they exist, but not, who would do this? I mean, maybe I'm just like, this is the time where I feel like, man, I must be so out of touch. I mean, I could never even in a sleazy world that I'm not living in, but I can never imagine doing that to anyone, especially unsolicited. But even not, it's like, you're going to send it on, like, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. What happens if, and then the other thing too is just like, what if you break up? I mean, they got that thing right there. If you're doing it involved in a relationship, and that still like can be embarrassing. Don't do that, and then, I know women do the same thing. This is a two-way street. But, in a lot, this is definitely a case where we're hearing from a lot of women, and it's freaking horrible. And, one story, we're going to see a whole cleansing of the business. And the only thing I can say is that, in the case of the guilty parties, it's got to be, and I just hope that some, I know that there's a fear of everyone in the business of innocent parties or, whatever, there's a huge fear in the business from people who are not guilty too. And rightfully so, by the way. I know I woke up this morning and I was told certain people are targets who have nothing to do with nothing. I don't want to mention names. They're not even people that are not even wrestlers, and I mean, they're in the business, but they're not even, and they're targets, and people are trying to get them, and they're trying to find stuff on them. And it's, because it's like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's, there's real victims, and then there's people who are, trying to get people at the same time. And those people really suck too. So it's a lot of suckiness right now.
So Deanna here says, I've typed and saved drafts, typed and deleted again and again. I don't even know what to say. I'm heartbroken. This is our world. That said, I'm one of the lucky few who don't have a story to tell. I've been protected in this industry more than I ever even realized. But I've been reading, I am listening, and standing strong with my sisters who have stories to tell.
Impact is bringing in a bunch of people. We know Gallows and Anderson, pretty much know EC3. Certainly strongly hinted Heath Slater. There may be others. And I expect most of them to be most of the new people will probably debut on Saturday night's pay-per-view. There'll be a 4-way for their championship because Tessa Blanchard is gone. So it's Trey Miguel, Ace Austin, and
Eddie Edwards and
Eddie
a mystery
Edwards
person.
And a mystery former world champion. So got that. The North against Ken Shamrock and Sami Callihan. Deonna Purrazzo challenging Jordan Grace for the Knockouts title. Willie Mack defending the X title against Chris Bay, managed by Johnny Swinger. It's a show. And, they focus on their TV, on Moose and Tommy Dreamer. They focus on their TV, on their matches. So if you watch the TV, you kind of know all the matches. And they're built up. It's there. It's not, I don't think, obviously it's not going to be that big of a deal. But I think there's some interest in just who's going to show up and when they show up, what they're going to do, what they're going to say, things like that.
All right, we got Slammiversary. They showed up at the end of the show. Obviously, they've signed with TNA. They announced it at the beginning of the show.
Impact, they're not TNA
Impact.
anymore.
Well, there's a TNA title, but yes, they are Impact Wrestling.
Yeah, they showed up. Eric Young, EC3, and Sabin and Shelley, which I didn't know were going to be there.
Well, what did you think of this show?
It's empty arena, so it's tough. I liked the last match. I thought everyone in the last match looked good in a different way. They were very crisp. I thought the wrestlers in the last match were far away a different level from the wrestlers in most of the other matches. As far as, Sabin and Shelley are a great team, and they actually did well. The opening match was good. Some of the other matches were, I didn't really care for Moose and Dreamer. That kind of a match, it's basically an ECW weapons match, kind of slow. When there's no fans and you're doing thumbtacks and things like that, I don't feel like it works at all. So, and the women's gauntlet match I thought was not good at all. Not good at all. Some of the matches were okay. Chris Bay and Willie Mack was fine. But I really liked the main event. Rich Swan is, so charismatic and such a good worker. And, he was Eric Young, for a lot of people who were disappointed, Eric Young ended up being like there were two added guys in the match. One was Rich Swann and one was Eric Young. And of course, there was Ace Austin, Eddie Edwards, and Trey Miguel. Trey Miguel looked great. Ace Austin is really freaking good. He doesn't get a lot of credit, because he's an Impact, but he is really freaking good. And Trey's a great worker, and Eddie Edwards, solid worker, ended up winning the world title. But Eric Young, after he's another one, he's in WWE all those years, and you forget what a really good worker Eric Young is, and he's not, he's in good shape, and him and Rich Swann they were awesome. So, I guess that would be my thought, is really good main event and so rest of the card.
Well, we had the Motor City Machine Guns debuting. They beat the Rascals in the main event. Sabin and Shelley looked great. Actually, everyone in this match looked really good.
Yeah, it was a good match.
Yep. ASCH Rush is the name of the move. They hit that on Xavier, got the win. And
really liked Shelley in particular.
Yes, in some ways, he's actually better than he's ever been. He's not as young as he used to be, but
he's always been good. I could see where you're coming from. I was very impressed with him, but I've been impressed with him ever since he made this last comeback. He's got a very unique style, and that's always a good thing, and he's good at it. And I don't think Sabin's had a lot of knee problems. I thought Chris Sabin used to be a great wrestler, and he was good tonight. But I would not say that like Chris Sabin was at the level that he used to be. He didn't have the speed and everything like that. But they're a great team, and Wentz and Xavier are a very good team too. So yeah, a good opening match.
We had the TNA World Champion Moose beat Tommy Dreamer. It was an old school rules match, which, if you don't watch Impact, it sounds like they would be doing a classic wrestling match. But old school rules is basically, it was an ECW match. And they hit each other with stuff. Moose suplexed him on the stage. There were thumbtacks. Moose is trying to shove Dreamer's face into the thumbtacks near the end.
Shove his eye into the thumbtacks, which is like, so, whatever.
So,
I mean, it's like I know that's like what Dusty Rhodes and Terry Funk would have done, but that's Dusty Rhodes and Terry Funk in like a blood feud in the main event, and this is the second match on the show, and there's and again, if you're trying to shove someone's eye and the fans are screaming and everything, which is like the object, it's one thing, but like for an empty arena, it just felt like this just didn't work at all.
So he's trying to shove his face into the thumbtacks, and I can't remember what exactly he said, but it was something like, "I never watched ECW." And of course, this is spinach for Tommy Dreamer. He fires up and he starts making his big comeback, but then Moose rakes his eyes, slams Dreamer onto the tacks, hits the spear, and gets the pin. I thought Moose looked good in this match.
Moose is a good athlete. I just didn't I didn't like them. It wasn't like it wasn't that I didn't like Moose, but I didn't like the style of the match. I just felt like with no fans, I just felt the match didn't work.
Speaking of no fans, we had the Knockouts Gauntlet match to determine number one contender, which was ultimately won by Kylie Ray. And there was so much wacky comedy in this match. And the thing that I've noticed, and it affects Orange Cassidy to one degree, but it affects something like this to a totally different degree. Comedy in wrestling, when there's no fans,
doesn't work.
Dies.
It doesn't work.
It's like a stand-up comedian with no audience.
Yeah.
You're out there telling jokes. There's no reaction. It's not funny. It's painful.
But the other thing here is that
there was very bad wrestling.
The wrestling wasn't good, and with no fans, bad wrestling with no fans is like worse wrestling because you don't have the fans covering up for it. And Kylie Ray is really good, but because of and some of the other women are good too, but there were enough that weren't that it really took the match down. And like I'm watching Kylie Ray, and it's just like I can tell by she's good, but compared to like everything that I've seen of Kylie Ray in Impact or in AEW or in indies that I saw before, I mean, like she kind of she's a good athlete and she stands out and she feels like a star. And Taya has that star power. But watching this match, it just felt like nobody was a star, and the match was just bad. And then Johnny Bravo, coming in twice, just dragged it down both times. And it was one of those matches where it went like 20 minutes because it's like a Royal Rumble, and it's like after a couple of minutes, it was just kind of like, we almost couldn't wait for it to end. I guess the story was. Kylie Ray ran the gauntlet from, first person in and last person out type of thing, right?
Yep, she started number one. Final four were Kimber Lee, Taya, Rosemary, and Kylie. And Ray eliminated Lee, and then Taya eliminated Rosemary, so it came down to Kylie and Taya, one-on-one match with pinfalls. And Ray hit
pinned her right away.
Destroyer super kick and got the pin. So she is the number one contender for the title. We had Heath Miller, the former Heath Slater, coming out.
I think they just call him Heath.
He was just Heath. Yeah, and he gets in the ring and he cuts his promo. And he says that he was planning to challenge the Rascals earlier, but he was late for his big debut here.
They explained it when he came in. He came out for because the Rascals match with Sabin and Shelley was an open challenge, so he wanted to get a partner to challenge the Rascals, not realizing that it was Central Time and the match had already taken place. Which
he flew there. How did he not know it was Central Time? I mean, come on, it's ridiculous.
It was an attempt at comedy, and you know what? I mean, it's like he's fine, but it felt I don't know.
Well, part of the problem was the microphone was like all messed up, and so it was only going over the speakers in the building. It wasn't being piped directly in his audio, so it just sounded low rent, like an indie show. And he came off as a 50-time bigger star on Raw when he was doing the deal with Drew McIntyre, that promo. I mean, this was fine, but the mic hurt, and then the Rohit Raju segment, he just came out and attacked him, and Heath actually hit a zigzag and laid him out.
Yeah, it's like Russian leg sweep. The thing to me is, I mean, we knew they were going to bring in a bunch of WWE guys who had been fired, and you know, they had already teased him because Rhino had done promos on the show that he's bringing in a tag team partner who's got kids, so you knew he was coming in. But watching the show, I felt he was like one too many, and also it's just weird. I think like when there's guys like EC3. Okay, EC3 wasn't used at all in WWE, which when it comes to coming back here is a good thing. He's just like a guy who's been gone that no one's seen, so he's like a fresh character. Gallows and Anderson were, the last that they were used that people remember was in the top match at WrestleMania, and they've been getting a lot of buzz and everything for coming in. But Heath was a guy who was never, ever, ever pushed. And then to bring a guy like that in and then to try to make him out to be a big star, it just makes your company look second rate, I think. And I just... it's like bringing in so many of those guys on this at the same time. I mean, granted, you could say the same thing with Eric Young, but they pretty much had taken Eric Young off television too. So whatever. But they didn't push Eric Young at all in WWE, but nobody'd seen Eric Young in so long that it's just, Eric Young disappeared and now he's back. Whereas Heath has been around and just, not used well at all. And for years, for years and years and years. So it's kind of like, if you push him, you're basically saying that you're second rate. I guess for Impact, it's okay because there's no, like when you watch Impact, there's no, illusion that you're watching the number one wrestling company in the world. You're just watching a wrestling company that's there. If you were watching a company that says that they're better, like it's New Japan or whatever, and then, but New Japan could push anyone they want if the guy's good. But I don't know. It just felt like I didn't feel it with him. I kind of felt like, I don't know. I couldn't push him. The other thing is he was like twice the size of Rohit Raju when they were doing the thing, which is whatever he just is.
We had Chris Bay, Willie Mack for the X Division title. I like this match a lot. Chris Bay is a great athlete. Willie Mack, I've always been a huge fan of. Does not look like he should be a great athlete, but he actually is. And just had a fun match. All sorts of big spots. Mack tried the 6-star frog splash. Bay avoided it. And then the big spot at the end. Mack hit the stunner. Went for the 6-star again. Bay pushed the referee. The referee's distracted. He rakes the eyes of Willie Mack. And he hits his final finesse. Gets the pin. Wins the X Division title. And there you go.
Yeah, I thought this was a good match. Bay's good. Willie Mack always gives you a good performance. Always works hard. Yeah.
We had the Heath Rhino segment backstage. Scott D'Amore walks up and says, "Listen, we're in a pandemic. It's a closed set. You can't just show up, dude. So you got to go." And he kicks him out. And then Rhino tells him, "Show up on Tuesday and we'll figure this out." So he'll be at the next set of tapings.
Well, the TV's on Tuesday, yeah.
We have the North versus Ken Shamrock and Sami Callihan for the Impact World titles. I thought Ethan Page, Josh Alexander, Sami Callihan, all really good. And then there was Ken Shamrock. God bless the guy. He can't move. He looked completely lost for about half the spots in this match. And he took it down a lot. He had like one good spot early where he was doing some grappling with Josh Alexander, which was good. He tried one dive at the end, and nobody was there, and he just crashed on the ground and almost killed himself.
He did a really cool overhead suplex on, I think it was Josh outside the ring. But, yeah, I think he's 56 years old, you know? I mean, that's just the reality. He's 56 years old. But the North's a really good team. I mean, like, I was very impressed. And I've always been. They're good. And I thought the match was good because of them. And when Sami Callihan was in, it was good. When Ken was in, you know, they were good enough to where it wasn't too bad. You know, it was all right when he was in, but it definitely was not. Not at the. He was not at the level of the other three.
So he accidentally kicked Callihan. They'd had some problems during the match, accidentally hitting each other, and then he had a top rope belly-to-belly on Alexander, went for this big dive on the outside. They just moved out of the way, so he crashed and burned, and then they threw him into the ring, and they hit their finish, and they got the pin, retained the titles. Then we had Ethan Page doing a promo, basically saying that they've been here for a year, they've destroyed everybody, they proved they're the greatest tag team in Impact history. Motor City Machine Guns come out.
Everybody expected Gallows and Anderson to come out on this spot.
But it was, in fact, the Machine Guns. Yeah. And Saban noted that The Office had granted them the next tag team title shot this coming Tuesday. So that's going to be the next title match.
That'll actually be a really good match.
Oh, yeah. So Deanna Purrazzo beat Jordan Grace to win the Knockouts title. And I thought this match was really good.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people did. I don't know. It didn't do it for me. It was, I mean, I thought it was fine, but I just thought that the caliber of everything just wasn't, it was okay. It was just, to me, it was like, it wasn't that smooth or anything like that. I mean, Deanna Purrazzo did some cool grappling and Jordan Grace was fine, but it never really grabbed me. And I think it went too long.
They pounded on each other. Deanna kept trying to go for the Fujiwara armbar. And finally, Jordan tried the Grace driver. Purrazzo block. And then finally got her in a double armbar. So after working for the Fujiwara armbar, she basically put her in a double armbar. I don't even know what you call it. But
double armbar.
It was a double armbar.
That's what I would call it.
I mean, it'd be sort of like a full Nelson with the arms straight, basically. But anyway, she got the move. Jordan Grace submitted verbally because she couldn't tap. And there you go. New champion.
Yeah, so Deanna Purrazzo and Kylie Ray's the next program.
They announced Bound for Glory October 24th, and then we had the main event.
That's my birthday. I don't want to watch that show.
Wow.
I do not want to watch that show. Anyway.
Well, we'll see what happens on October 24th, Dave.
I may not have a choice. I may not be able to go anywhere anyway.
So first they bring out Rich Swann as the mystery fourth person in the match, and everyone stands in the ring.
Well, the thing is they'd actually done a segment earlier where they were looking for Gallows and Anderson, and they opened up the dressing room door for Gallows and Anderson. Actually, they did something earlier, which actually was kind of cute. Johnny Swinger, they were waiting for Gallows and Anderson the whole show, okay? So Johnny Swinger arrives in this Jaguar, as a matter of fact. And they go, Johnny Swinger, how did you get this Jaguar? And he goes, I went to the rental car place, and they had it for some guy named Anderson, and I looked around, and Ole was nowhere to be found, because Johnny Swinger does this gimmick where he's caught in, like, the 80s, and he's actually really good at it. So that was the first Gallows and Anderson segment. The second one, they go to the dressing room with Gallows and Anderson, but Rich Swann comes out on crutches and just kind of talks about how, I'll be back soon, So it says it was a swerve because he's actually healed. So he came out with his crutches and then threw them away, and he did all kinds of high-flying moves, so he's in fact healed.
Well, it was double swerve because he comes out for the fourth guy, and then right before the match starts, a fifth guy comes out, and it's Eric Young, and it's now a five-way, which a long time ago, this was originally going to be a five-way.
Right, with Tessa Blanchard and Michael Elgin.
Yep. So Eric Young got busted open early. I can't remember the spot, but something happened, and I think he bonked heads with somebody, and he's bleeding all over by the eye.
He had two cuts. He had the one cut that was there early, and then he had a second cut over the left eye later. No, over the right eye. The first one was was the side of the left eye, and then the second cut was over the right eye.
So Trey and Austin are going after each other from the opening bell, but they keep getting separated. That's obviously this is their version of MJF and Jungle Boy, I'm sure. They're going to be feuding forever, two young guys. And Young ended up hitting the pile driver, pinned Trey, so he was out of there. Eddie then went to superplex Ace, and they had this big spot where Swan went running, and Ace and Eddie flew off the top turnbuckle through the announce table, and so they're on the floor dead. So, bunch of spots in the ring. Young goes to give Swan the pile driver. Swan reverses, rolls up Eric Young, and pins him. So, of course, Eric Young had been talking trash to Rich Swann, saying, you were the letdown surprise, but I was the main event surprise, something of that nature. So, of course, then Rich pins him. So he's furious, and so he destroys Rich Swann's knee. He clips him. He Pillmanizes the leg multiple times. He just totally destroys this guy's leg. And then finally they get him out of here, and Rich Swann won't quit. So Ace comes back and tries a couple of cradles, but then he chop blocks the leg, hits his finish, the fold, and he eliminates Rich Swann. This was like the best thing in the whole match. The whole Eric Young, Rich Swann leg gimmick.
I liked everything in the match. I thought the match might have gone about 2 minutes too long, but all those guys were they're so crisp. I mean, that's the one thing is like they were so crisp and such their timing was good. Their work was so good. Like I said, just stood out from everybody on the show and especially like. My favorite guys were Rich Swann and Eric Young, though, as far as...
Eric Young is an incredible worker. He's been an incredible worker since the early 2000s.
He gets no credit, though, or little credit.
I gave him credit for years.
Yeah, he's a great worker. I remember when he was in NXT, and I thought he was like a great worker, but, it was one of those things where he's never going to get a push in WWE, and he never did, no matter what. And, I mean, and he's a good character, too. But so hopefully they do something with him because he was really good in this match.
Came down to Ace and Eddie. They kicked out of a bunch of finishes, and then finally Eddie hit the Die Hard Flosion, pinned him, won the title. He's the new champion. And then, immediately upon celebrating, he's attacked by Madman Fulton, and Gallows and Anderson, the Good Brothers, make the save. And they lay everybody out. They have a beer bash with Eddie. And in the last 30 seconds, they cut to a video of the returning EC3 throwing a glass at a wall. So he is back.
It looked like he's going to be playing like a psycho character. That's how I kind of read it anyway. Not the same. It was definitely not the same EC3 that was there, years ago.
And finally, Impact. Kurt Hawkins made his debut under the name Brian Myers, which is his real name. So he has gone to Impact. Motor City Machine Guns won the tag team titles from the North. And they have announced that Eddie Edwards will be defending the title in 7 days against one of the men who tried to win it at Slammiversary. That could be Eric Young, perhaps, Trey Miguel. Actually, it's Trey Miguel. So there you go. I read that wrong. Trey Miguel will be defending. Let me just start over again, everybody. You think this job is easy? It's all because I got choke bombed. Never been the same. Trey Miguel will be challenging Eddie Edwards for the title next week. on Impact Wrestling, which I have been told is no longer TNA. Well, how much of the Impact pay-per-view did you see?
I didn't see, I saw the first couple matches, but I didn't really see enough to talk about it. The one thing, okay, so the two key stories, as best I can tell, coming out of this pay-per-view, number one was evidently, because I did not see the Deonna Purrazzo Su Yung match where Su Yung won the championship, but Kylie Rae was supposed to be in the match. They never announced why she wasn't, and there were a lot of people really upset. Not that she wasn't there, because everyone knows, immediately, because they didn't say anything, everybody thought it was COVID, because that's what you do in wrestling. You lie about COVID and you lie about concussions, and everybody just figured, that's. I'm not saying everyone does that, but that's kind of. I'm not even saying most do it. Actually, most don't do it. But one person does it, and then people think that they are wrestling. So, there is that deal. But what was I saying? So, but they made no announcement, and I don't know why you would make no announcement. I just don't. All you got to do is she wasn't medically cleared. She's injured. There you go. That's it. That's what AEW is going to do with Pentagon and Phoenix, or they already have. Everyone knows people get hurt. So, it's not like, and it was one of the most built-up matches on the show. So, there was that. And also, Xfinity and Comcast did not broadcast the show. There was some kind of a foul-up in the system. You may be able to get a replay of it today, but I heard that it just went out. Their pay-per-view stuff went out last night. And that's a big system, and and TNA's or Impact is not doing very many pay-per-view buys at all. But it's still, whatever it is, it's still a significant part of the country. It's probably not that many, but it's still, I got, a lot of messages from people who tried to order and could not order the show. Some of whom ended up just wanting to see it and buying it on Fight. So you could still get it, but some just didn't get it. But I'll talk about it, I guess, tomorrow as far as the rest of it, because I just I didn't see enough of it to really comment. I saw Dwayne Johnson's speech on Ken Shamrock.
Dude, it was like he did the same day that he endorsed Biden. He had that shirt on.
He went to the same place. I think he likes the lighting, and I know he loves the shirt, obviously. And that's what it was. Yeah, the same shirt. Yeah, to tell everybody that...
if it was the old TNT, they would have aired the wrong video, and he would have endorsed Biden and said nothing about Shamrock.
They kind of did. Did you hear about the production snafu?
I did not.
Okay, so they went to an interview. It was supposed with Heath Slater, with Heath and Rhino. Okay, and Heath starts the promo, and then they just stop and go, let's take it from the top, and then they go 3, 2, 1, go, and then they go, and it's like was on TV. It's like it was like so sloppy, and the pregame show, I saw a little of the pregame show, and one of the guys in the pregame show was so nervous, and it was D'Lo Brown and Madison Rain, and then a third guy, and I only saw a few minutes of it, but the guy was so nervous, and he was just mixing things up and admitting that he was mixing things up and just trying to say, I'm so excited about this show. And that's why he was mixing things up. But it was like, yeah, that wasn't good either. But they did like a Royal Rumble match, the Gauntlet, where Heath Slater and Rhino, if one of them didn't win, then they're both gone from Impact. But if Rhino or Heath Slater won, then Heath Slater, or just Heath as he's called, would get a contract. So you knew one of them was winning, and Heath got thrown out, and the announcers were, oh my God, it looks bleak. But Rhino, in fact, did win. So he both gets a title shot at any title he wants, which might be the tag team title with Heath. And Heath's in, and Rhino's saved his job, and that was that. What he said.
All right, take us through the Impact injuries, and then your thoughts on the pay-per-view.
Okay, so let's see. So I guess the Kylie Ray situation is probably the first one to address. So what happened? She probably was hurt 2 weeks ago. In fact, I know she was hurt 2 weeks ago, but that's not what happened here. What happened here was she was there on Friday. They were expecting her to work on Saturday, and she never came to the building on Saturday. And she left no word. She called nobody. She disappeared. And as the show is going on, obviously they're hoping she's going to show up, and they can't find her. They looked, she's gone, but you're just hoping she'll come up. So that's why nothing was said beforehand. Now, it was awkward as hell, especially watching it with hindsight. I think probably the situation is because they didn't know that it's like, do you want to go in there and say, like, Kylie Ray was injured, somebody beat up Kylie Ray backstage, and then it comes out like the next day because you don't know where she is, that there might be like foul play or something bad happened to her, and you did this, you just looked like so bad. So I think that's probably the whole. By the way, there was no foul play. She's fine. I mean, as far as physically fine. But I mean, the whole thing is that it just was so. They play the tape of her, her whole video package. They play her music, and then nobody comes out. And then Deonna Purrazzo kind of does this thing. Well, I kind of expected this. And then she challenges like anyone in the back, man or woman, and then Su Yung comes out. So that's what they did on the show. But yeah, I mean, it's she just didn't come to the building, and that's the story. And they did find out after the show that she was okay, but during the show they knew nothing, from what I understand. So that's the basic situation with her. So Heath Miller thought he tore his groin. He ended up not winning the match, and which he was supposed to win the match, but he was in there for a long time, but didn't do a lot. Got thrown out by Sami Callihan. Rhino won the match, and he went to the hospital after the match, and he had a hernia, and the thought is he will need surgery, which means he'll be out for a while. I don't know if that's 100%, but that's kind of what the doctors kind of told him. But he was back at the hotel after going to the hospital later that night. And then Alex Shelley, I guess the situation with Alex Shelley. So Alex Shelley comes out for the tag team title match, and before the match starts, he takes this double arm pile driver from Josh Alexander, and he's dropped right on his head on the entrance ramp. That looked nasty. Now, it was scripted, but I guess he has a real injury and he's taking time off. So my gut is that, like, he was injured going in. I mean, for sure he was injured going in, because that's why they did the scripting. I mean, it was very clear that thing was done to take him out of the match because he was injured. And I don't know what the whole situation is, but I guess it's damage to the C5 and C6 vertebrae. So he's got some neck damage. I think that there's some numbness and things like that based on what he said on Twitter. I have not heard anything like more distinct than that, but that's kind of like what happened with those injuries. I think that pretty much covers that whole show as far as the injuries go. So the show so the show was weird. So it opened with TJP, Trey Miguel, Jordan Grace, Willie Mack, Chris Bay, and Rohit Raju for the X Division title, and Rohit Raju pinned Trey Miguel. Trey Miguel had done a splash TJP did a splash on Trey Miguel. Rohit Raju hit TJP with a knee, got rid of him, and stole the pin. The same finish of every 3-way, 6-way, whatever that you usually see. And very good match. Nice match for the opener. Johnny Swinger, there's some interview segment thing. And Johnny Swinger talked about how he just came back from a double shot for Goulas. And the pay was cheap, but the gimmicks were great. So that's what Johnny Swinger is actually hilarious. He does this retro character where he's from the territorial era, and he acts like a complete territorial wrestler, like all those guys that you started with that were in gimmick all the time. You know those type of guys, Bryan?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's like all of them combined.
Do I ever?
Yeah, I remember them too. But I mean, he's very entertaining with it. I definitely get a kick out of him. They had the Gauntlet Rumble, which was the match we talked about, which Rhino won. It was okay, 25 minutes long, which with 20 people, coming in every minute, it never really got old, but it never got good either. It was just kind of there. And Ethan Page did a good promo. EC3 and Moose did a cinematic match. So the story, it was pretty good. I mean, as far as cinematic match goes, the story is that, EC3 has been haunting Moose, but in actuality, EC3 was trying to motivate Moose to stop being a goof and become, get your killer instinct and become the guy, stop, pretending to be a fake champion and actually win real championships and be who you are and all this. And in the end, basically Moose had to kill him, not dead, but destroy him. And he was carried out he's in this place with all these masked fans, and he's being very, very vicious to Moose. And then Moose has to fight fire with fire. And in the end, Moose destroys him, and EC3 is happy because, his goal was to make Moose. So that was the story of that match. Eddie Edwards and Ken Shamrock. Ken Shamrock won with an ankle lock thanks to help from Sami Callihan. Ken is 56 years old, almost 57. And, that's old to do this. And, I think they talked him out of doing dives because he didn't do a dive in this match. He's been doing dives on every big show. And I know from people there, it's that have kind of told me, it's we try to tell him not to do dives. You're Ken Shamrock, but he just feels like I got to keep up with these young guys. And that's what they all do. And when he does his dives, you think he's going to break something because he's old and because he's not good at it, but he does it. But no dives for Ken Shamrock. Punches were kind of slow in a lot of ways. Eddie Edwards is a really good worker. Wish that he could be somewhere with a higher spotlight. When he was in Japan with Noah, he was freaking great. And he's had great matches here too. But this was, it's you're limited with Ken Shamrock, unfortunately. Then we had the tag team thing where, it was supposed to be a 4-team, but Chris Sabin went on his own. So it's Chris Sabin by himself, Gallows and Anderson, the North, and Madman Fulton and Ace Austin. And that's fine. Most of the match story was Chris Sabin on his own, kind of selling a lot, making comebacks. He was the focal point of the match. But the finish of the match was Ethan Page hit Carl Anderson with a belt shot, and Josh Alexander pinned Carl Anderson to win. And then was the Deonna Purrazzo, Kylie Ray thing that was very weird. So Deonna Purrazzo challenged anyone to come out. It was Su Yung came out, who has not been a character for a long time. Su Yung, Benara, has been wrestling as Susie, a babyface, a pure babyface instead of a crazed out character. And they have been teasing, that Su Yung was going to come back. And it seemed to me that the idea was that Kylie Ray and Susie had become best friends, and then Su Yung was going to turn on Kylie Ray. But instead, Su Yung just came out and played crazy and had a match with Deonna. Deonna had points in this match where she looked quite good, but overall I wouldn't say it was a good match. And Su Yung won. She did the I guess it was like a Falcon Arrow, and then the Panic. I think it's called the Panic Switch, which is her finisher. So she won the championship, which I guess in a lot of ways, one of the old rules that isn't always followed, and and you can't always follow it, is that when you have a substitution in a big match that people really want to see, you usually try to put the sub over. So especially if it's a babyface, although in this case they were both heels. So and in this match they were both heels the whole match. So that was that. And then Eric Young and Rich Swann had a very nice match, a very good match. And Rich Swann won with the Phoenix Splash. Sold most of the way. Eric Young's working on his bad foot almost the entire match. Eric Young is really a great worker in the old school style, as far as just being a heel who's like all his stuff looks good. His heel mannerisms are good. He's very vicious when trying to attack Rich Swann's leg. Rich Swann's such a natural baby face. So they had a nice match. Most of it, Eric Young beating him down, Rich Swann making some comebacks. Considering all the injuries that Rich Swann has had, he really moves well. And Swann won the championship. So it was not acknowledged, but husband and wife winning the women's and men's championship in the last two matches on the biggest pay-per-view of the year, and it was not planned out to go that way, but that is the way it went.
What's going on with the Rascals?
Their contracts with Impact are expiring, so next week will be their final appearance on the show. It's going to be Rich Swann and Trey Miguel against Desmond Xavier and Zachary Wentz. So Xavier and Wentz are most likely headed to NXT, and Trey Miguel is probably headed to NXT. I've heard some talk of AEW interest as well, but they're probably going to be on the next induction, phase. Those guys will be brought in. So that's the situation there. The Impact did not give them a big number for a renewal, so they decided to take the WWE offer, which was probably a better offer. And they're good. Impact used them fairly decently, not as big as maybe I would have thought they would have, but once Gallows and Anderson came in, it's kind of like those guys as a team were not going to be getting a big push, because it's clearly the North and Gallows and Anderson and the Motor City Machine Guns were going to be the key teams in that division. So they were pretty, their ceiling was fairly low, and so they weren't going to get paid very much. So that's the situation. They're a talented team. I think they could do well in NXT. Just, there's just so much talent in WWE that not every, so many guys go there and you don't hear about them. I think these guys would be on NXT television fairly quickly. I don't think they'll be sitting out and doing nothing for a year. But, and the good babyface style team. And Trey's a really good worker. Just the problem with, again, a small guy who can really work in the WWE system, it's just like there's 100 of them or 50 of them or whatever it is. It's going to be hard. But right now, in the situation that everything is in right now, people taking WWE jobs that otherwise may not, is going to be more plentiful, and because it does make more sense in the situation things are. You can go in there and say, well, I'll do indies for another year before going to WWE or something. But if you're in that type of a situation, there's not going to be a lot of indies going on for a long time, and you're not going to be able to make. I don't see people being able to make a good living on the indies like they could have before. So at that point, it becomes pretty much, AEW, which already has too many wrestlers. I don't know, I know the Young Bucks know Xavier and Wentz. I saw them, they've wrestled each other in PWG, had hell of matches. I remember I was at one live, it was incredible. And, but, I mean, how many more people can AEW add? They already have so many people that, people don't get on TV for weeks at a time that are good. So, they may not even, I don't know if they got an offer from them or not, but it's tough. And WWE, is back to being pretty aggressive at trying to sign everyone up that they can so they don't go elsewhere. In many cases, if you got that WWE offer, we've seen it with Alex Zane is another one. I know Alex Zane was wanting to do New Japan, but it's very difficult because New Japan is not bringing a lot of guys over that are not already familiar or not already over to the audience, because they're not having shows with 9 matches and a bunch of 6-man tags and everything to fit a whole bunch of guys on cards. So it's just everything's different now.
I mean, I thought that was one of the mistakes that TNA made when you were there, Mike, is everybody that WWE cut, they jumped in, brought him in, pushed him like crazy, and all of a sudden it became perceived as like, oh, this is where, the ex-WWE guys go when they lose their spot in WWE, and they would come in and they would be, because week 1, when they come in, they get this giant reaction. Every time, it's always going to happen. But then by week 6 or 7, mediocre WWE guy is mediocre TNA guy, and, but they're still being put, there's so many guys that came from WWE to TNA that I thought got pushed really hard, did not work very hard, and I thought that in the long run, it's like they're recognizable names, but I thought that there were too many of them, and I thought that I don't want to say it impeded TNA's growth, because I wouldn't necessarily say that, but I think it impeded TNA's product, which in the long term impeded TNA's growth, if you know what I'm saying. But Mike,
that's a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah.
That is really a lot of ground to cover. Well, I guess as far as the Zelina Vega situation, just to hit on that,
and
I think strictly, I thought that she was just a great person to work with an incredible story, as has been kind of brought out at times through the years, and her entree into wrestling, and the fact that her and her father, had that great bond before his passing associated with 9/11. I think strictly from a contractual commitment standpoint, you just have to say that WWE is in the right at this time. From that, the fact that she signed a contract with them. Now, is it for the WWE the wrong time to fight this battle? It sure looks like it to me. But at the same time,
with the administration change, I think the timing's terrible for them.
I think it is, but they must feel that it's the only avenue that we have to rein this in. I don't think they're that stupid that they don't sense the possible situation with Biden and Andrew Yang, and how the independent contractors overall just might be reclassified. So I think they must figure that they had to do it just to cut it off. From her standpoint, I think the risk factor is very, very big because of not being on WWE TV going forward. You brought up the other options that she has, and I think as a mouthpiece, just fantastic as a manager. But do we know her contract status now? And I know that they released her, but
okay, so she's got
non-compete.
She's got a 90-day non-compete. So February.
Okay, so that's it. Well,
February, she can go anywhere she wants.
Then I don't think it's as big of a risk as I thought it might be, because I think that her popularity would certainly span that 90 days. Now, if there was a case where they could freeze her out for longer, I would think that it might be more of a risk, but I don't really think so. And I think that she'll end up resurfacing with an Impact or with an AEW. I would certainly expect that. To get to the second part of what we were talking about with the WWE talent and how much they were relied upon in TNA, I always felt that the better path really would have been that commitment to AJ Styles, that commitment to Samoa Joe, that commitment to the talent that was associated initially with TNA. Because we found that I think when you would bring those WWE guys in, you might get a little bit of a boost as far as ratings or eyeballs for a while, but it all seemed to eventually just kind of level out. And I always felt that the bigger upside in the long term would have been with the non-WWE talent getting pushed so hard.
Yeah. I mean, so now what about your thoughts as far as AEW? Because it's like it's one of those things where a lot of the WWE talent that came in, I mean, it's a different thing. When WWE talent came to TNA, it was either one of two things. It was either like Christian, when he came, it's because he had buddies, and essentially he knew he was going to be pushed to the moon, and in WWE he was going nowhere. And then when his contract was up, he went back to WWE after being pushed to the moon for 3 years, or whatever, however long it was. But he knew. I mean, it's like he made a decision based on the fact that he was going nowhere in WWE. He was basically a job guy who could talk, and in TNA, he was going to be world champion and go on a winning streak and be the focal point. Him and Sting would be the focal point of the whole company. So, you have that, but most of them were guys, WWE would cast them off. They would make cuts. You would bring them in, and they would have the attitude that we're WWE guys. It's very different in AEW. That's the one thing is every AEW guy who's come in, whether it's Moxley, Brody Lee, Jericho, they all came in with a chip on their shoulder. And they all came in, FTR maybe more than any of them. They all came in with a chip on their shoulder that we are a lot better and we're going to prove we're a lot better. So that was a much healthier attitude. But still, every time AEW brings in another WWE guy, I go like, what is the casual wrestling fan perception when this guy, Brody Lee, who Vince didn't think anything of, comes in and now he's a star, and granted he is working like a star, but there's still that perception of, well, they're the group, you know what I mean? It's like, now Moxley, of course, and Jericho are kind of the exceptions, but even with Jericho, when I would talk about Jericho was, a great star in WWE who Vince thought was past 40, which he was, and it's time to fade him out, and you put him in the middle, and his whole role is to put over younger guys. And he's good at it. He got every segment over. He keeps himself over while always losing his key matches and helps guys get over. For Vince, it was a good role. Now he moves to this new company, and he is, in year one, he is the star of the company. Even today, he's probably gets as much TV time and as much leeway as anyone. I mean, he is, you could say he is the number one star in the company, and you look at, and he was in, and should be too. I mean, it's not like he's getting handed something he doesn't deserve, but, and he's not performing, but the whole thing is that, like, if he was in WWE, it was like, well, when he was in WWE, he wasn't John Cena, he wasn't Batista, he was the next rung down, and now he's the superstar of this company. Does that make the company second rate? It's a weird one, but like in the case of certainly with Moxley and Jericho, I think that we have to go with the idea that they were incredibly beneficial, I think, to AEW, and I don't know that there were guys who were. I have a hard time going, okay, so who was really beneficial to TNA? I think Sting was to a degree, but he wasn't even a WWE, but he was a WCW guy, not really a WWE guy. So, but I think the other ones, when I look back, I mean, Kurt Angle was for sure, just because, he was still in his prime to a degree. I mean, he had phenomenal matches and his name recognition was so high and he was a higher level star. I think Kurt was, but I think a lot of the other ones were drains.
I think when you look back on it, in almost every situation, it was a great business decision for the talent. I think almost probably across the board, they all benefited financially from TNA, and a lot of them were able, as you mentioned, able to go back to WWE, which, boy, at times you would think that door might not be open, but it certainly was. I think with AEW, it's difficult to make just generalizations about it because of the people that you talked about, the Jerichos and the Moxleys. But I also look at Jericho and Moxley as almost reinventing their characters in AEW. So while I know
Brody
that they
Lee
were,
too, for that matter,
Brody Lee too. So while I know they were associated with WWE, I don't just look at them as necessarily being part of the drain in AEW. That being said, when I look at things overall and the amount of people and the amount of talent that AEW has signed from WWE, and when I take into account what I presume to be the mentality of their fan base, I can't get inside every one of their heads, but when I think I know what an AEW fan is, I think that probably for the most part, I think that the number of former WWE signings hurts the potential growth for AEW.
I have a point, and I have a question for both of you, and the question is probably hypothetical, but Dave does have a little bit of experience writing for MMA fighting. But the point that I wanted to make was I definitely get the hustle of some of these folks to make money during this time and, do it from their house. Like it's really great to see them be able to market themselves. But at some point, the pandemic is going to stop, and we're going to go back to living our lives, hopefully sooner than later. But I think banking on being able to do this kind of business might not be necessarily a great long-term thing because, there's going to be more opportunities for entertainment. So that's just one thing. But the second thing, and kind of wanted to ask Dave about it, is we just had the proposition in California for Uber.
Proposition 22.
And so, the argument supporting one of the supporting arguments was that if this thing didn't pass, Uber as a company whose main thing is to make money would cut back on drivers. And so some of these drivers like it the way that it is, and they didn't want that to happen and were vehemently against it, even though the prop was created to help support these people because they want them to become employees. Now, the question for the WWE side is, if something happened and they had to treat these folks as employees rather than contractors, wouldn't one of the solutions for Vince be to really cut the roster in half? And
that depends on you. It could be, but it's not necessarily, because the reason that they don't have this bloated roster now of so much talent because they have need for it. They have it to keep it away from other people, and that dynamic is not going to change if they become employees. You don't want that talent going to, and it's obviously it's AEW. Before it would have been New Japan Pro Wrestling. I don't know that they're that concerned about New Japan Pro Wrestling these days, but certainly AEW, is the one. There's all kinds of guys that are coming up right now that they don't need because they have more people than they know what to do with. And AEW does too, for that matter, in a lot of ways. But when the new hot guy comes across on the indie scene, as the indie scene is drying up, and we've seen it with a couple of guys just in the last couple of weeks, WWE goes hard for them. AEW, sometimes they do and sometimes they don't because they have more people than they know what to do with. And WWE's got unlimited money, and WWE still goes for them because to keep them away. I mean, it's not like they're going to use any of these guys. I mean, maybe they will in a couple of years, maybe they won't. But it's to keep them off the board, away from New Japan Pro Wrestling and away from AEW. So that's not going to change. Now, if AEW goes away, something like that happens, yeah, all bets are off. But then, whether they're employees or independent contractors, at that point, half that roster is getting purged, and everyone that goes to sign a new contract's not getting raises, no matter what the TV revenue is, because that's just the nature of how WWE is going to be.
And so basically, what you said is the argument that I actually heard for Uber, this thing this thing passing, which is if Uber has to make people employees, they could make sure that they don't then drive for Lyft or any taxis or any other thing. And so
they wouldn't be able to if they're employees.
Right. So the company is the customer and the employees are better off. But and that would definitely be something for WWE, but I just really wonder like how would Vince, being the businessman, and it's all about maximizing, profits.
It's not just maximizing profit with Vince. Okay, it's maximizing profit, but more importantly, not letting anyone else make a profit. And minimizing competition is long-term maximizing profit. It's not maximizing profit in 2020, because if they wanted to maximize profit in 2020, they'd cut a lot of guys right now. But the key is that they want to make sure that nobody else. I mean, they left that little creak in the door in 1995 and 1984, whatever it was, when WCW was down and out, and all of a sudden, and Vince doesn't want to relive that. And Vince had a hard time for a couple of years there with real competition, and since then he's never had real competition, and now we're back in that situation. So, like I said, if there was no AEW, the whole situation is different. In this whole thing, where he's resenting, even though they pay such a low percentage of the talent, he's resenting paying $750,000 to certain people that now are only working one day a week, but he signed the contract, and so he has to now.
So the Callis thing has been in the works for a while, and I didn't know this, but I presume that Don Callis came up with the Omega Jericho match. I presume he came up with this idea, and Tony Khan went with it, and Omega probably wanted it, and it is going to be some sort of promotional thing, and the promotions are going to be working together to a degree, which obviously is greatly beneficial to Impact. It does open up the doors for people which is actually great for Impact. Because some of their guys are going to end up on AEW television, probably, like the NWA, like Thunder Rosa, with the NWA, and maybe people from New Japan and AAA. I mean, AEW's wanting to work with people right now, and vice versa. Kenny Omega's going to Mexico. Kenny Omega's going to be on Impact on Tuesday with the first interview. He's going to do. They haven't advertised, but he will be doing an interview on Wednesday as well. I don't know that Don Callis will be with him, but I have this. I mean, when I saw Don do the thing with Paige, it felt to me like Don is going to manage Kenny, and that will be the big thing with Kenny as champion, trying to do the Bockwinkel and Heenan thing. And I cannot tell you that that's what's happening, but Don Callis grew up with Bockwinkel and Heenan. Don Callis very much, that's his childhood, and I feel that there is a very good chance that something like that is what is in the offing, and how it's all going to work. But I mean, I saw it was, I didn't even think of it on Tuesday night's Impact. They aired a match with the Young Bucks against Sabin and Shelley. I think it was like a ladder match from like 10 years ago, which was just hilarious to watch, just because I mean, it's like, God, the Young Bucks are on Impact for like no reason, but they do sometimes show old matches on Impact. So it wasn't like so much of a giveaway, except it was the Young Bucks, and it was kind of like, there's something going on here. So I don't know, like if, like Young Bucks against Gallows and Anderson, if you think about it. I know the Young Bucks were, when the Hardys were champions in Impact and the Young Bucks were champions in Ring of Honor, they had laid out this year-long program where they would win the belts back and forth. Like the Young Bucks were going to win the Impact TNA belts, and the Hardys were going to win the ROH belts, and somehow, they would do a program for a year, and then, everybody would wind up with their belts at the end. And then Vince offered the Hardys so much money, and they left, so the program, there was that rushed program from that year. But the original plan before the Hardys went to work for Vince was to do that all year. So that idea's in people's minds. I'm not saying that's going to happen now, but Young Bucks against Gallows and Anderson, I mean, that was the idea for the angle on the very first episode of Dynamite, except that Gallows and Anderson signed a new contract with WWE because they were offered so much money, and they've been probably kicking themselves in the head from about 2 months after they signed that contract, thinking like, what the fuck? We were going to be in the angle on the first thing, where they were going to beat down Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. And obviously they wanted AJ to be the third guy in that angle, which didn't happen. Now AJ, I don't think he's had second thoughts. Maybe he has, but those guys did from the beginning, because they realized that they're never going to be used that well with WWE, and they were going to walk in and be the top heel tag team feuding with the Young Bucks. So it's ideas, I mean, there's talented guys there, but I mean, it's what a great move by Callis, in the sense of they're going to get their guys, some of their guys, and the name of the promotion and everything on TNT, which is a way, way bigger thing than Access. I mean, for Impact, it gives them access to some guys, I mean, Motor City Machine Guns and Gallows and Anderson, and I mean, Rich Swan's really good, and maybe Sami Callihan, and Eddie Edwards is really good, and Omega could be wrestling some of those guys on TV and things like that. Everything and anything is possible. How it's going to go, I don't know, but it's all possible because the sides are working together, and it is of great benefit, incredible benefit to Impact. I have no doubt that Impact on Tuesday will probably do its biggest rating since they've gone on Access. But the hope is that it turns into one of those things. I'm presuming a promotion versus promotion feud to a degree. I mean, it makes sense to do a shoot thing. Those things work if they're done right. I know that Impact is a much smaller company, and maybe the idea, if it was with New Japan, would be better, but well, it didn't happen with New Japan, and we'll see. But when Tony Khan did the thing about, what was that phrase he used about 3 weeks ago that everybody got mad about, and he doubled down on it yesterday? What was that phrase?
It was the landscape of wrestling is changing, something to that effect.
No, it wasn't. No. Like the balance of power is shifting. Is that what he said?
Something like that.
Yeah. So when he said it, which was this was actually the show that this was about, which is the return of Sting and the interpromotional thing. So that's when he said yesterday, it's like it's still to come. Pac was part one, but there's still more, and it's going to come, and you're going to see it. This is what that was.
Well, let's talk about this AEW show. We probably won't have time to go in great detail about NXT, but if you did not see the NXT show, you missed virtually nothing. It was just some build to the Impact Wrestling tonight, where Kenny Omega is going to speak in one way or the other. It's a taped show, so I guess we'll find out if they... we'll find out what they did.
I presume it was taped right after the thing in Orlando is what I'm going to guess, and they're probably going to splice it into the show in some form.
Well, is it empty arena or what's going on here?
Yeah, they do stuff in Nashville.
So they could have taped it in Nashville. Actually,
I
doubt they did, but they could have.
Oh yeah, it's possible. It's possible that they did. It's possible it was pre-taped. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's possible. Sure.
Well, the next night we've got AEW. Nothing at this point announced for NXT coming off TakeOver, except for the appearance by Finn Balor.
Finn Balor's back, so the cat's back, and the Meisters can't play anymore, something like that, right?
He referred to NXT as his litter box. I couldn't help but remember that line.
Did he say that?
Yes.
Okay, I mean, I heard cat and mice stuff, but I never heard litter box.
He absolutely, positively, 100% mentioned that NXT was the litter box.
So hopefully he's going to be facing Kyle O'Reilly in his litter box. But hopefully it's not in a real litter box, because given the nature of like all the hot-shotting that's been done.
Dude, given what they've done with Grimes and Loomis, nothing would surprise me at this point.
I know. I mean, I don't want to see a litter box match.
So AEW on Wednesday night, we've got Tony Schiavone interviewing Sting. We've got
and Shaq.
We'll get to this. We got the Inner Circle ultimatum. The Inner Circle is going to decide whether to unite or break up forever.
I got a feeling they're not gonna break up.
Shaq will in fact address AEW in an interview with Tony Schiavone. Shaq is going to be there.
Unbelievable.
At AEW this Wednesday.
Yeah, and they haven't announced this yet, and this could change, I suppose. But since the show was already taped, but I don't know, But Omega's supposed to do something coming off of Tuesday also.
Orange Cassidy versus MJF for the Dynamite Diamond Ring. We have the Young Bucks versus Jack Evans and Angelico. If Evans and Angelico win, they get a future title shot. Lance Archer, Penta, and Rey Fenix versus Eddie Kingston, Butcher, and The Blade. We got FTR versus Griff Garrison and Brian Pillman Jr., Dustin Rhodes versus 10. Abaddon will be in action, and an interview with Kenny Omega. 1, 2, 3.
That sounds
4,
like way
5,
too much
6,
for 2 hours.
7, 8, 9. That's 10 segments they've announced.
Yeah, I don't know. That sounds like they're going to be whatever. It sounds like a show that will probably do real big numbers. But man, it sounds like a lot for one show. And some people have like asked me and have brought up, why would they put Shaq and Sting's interview and on the same show and Omega's? And it's like, I think the deal is that with Shaq, it's just like, you know what I mean? It's like if they can get him, then that's the week it's on. And Sting, was already in, so that was going to be. And the Sting interview should have been this week anyway. So that's just the nature of the beast. But yeah, it sounds like an awful lot for a 2-hour show. But they're building up for December 30th. It's supposed to be a real big show. And then NXT is supposed to do a real big show on January 6th. And so that's kind of where I guess everything's peaking next.
Can momentarily put a smile on your face. Hopefully it's reminiscing about the Kenny Omega Don Callis segment on Impact.
Well, that was pretty good. I watched that like at 4 a.m. last night, and it did put a smile on my face. It was just it
was so good.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought that was good. Did you see the Tony Khan and Tony Schiavone thing?
That was also so good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that stuff on Impact. I thought, it's funny because I thought it's so hard because the business has changed so much and media has changed so much, and just the way people react to wrestling is so different. But like when I watch those things, the thing that really hit me is like if you go back to say the 80s, or even the 90s, and if you did something like this, I would say, and I've been pretty good at this. I was, I'm pretty good at judging what's going to happen next. I mean, the first time with that Bash of the Beach with Hogan, I knew it was giant. I knew it, and it was. Of course, it didn't last, but it lasted a couple years. And with Austin and Brett, which I can't say I knew with Austin and Brett, but I sure as hell knew with Austin and Tyson. But I did know with Austin, with Brett, in the sense that Austin, I felt watching this, or Flair and Kerry in the cage match. I remember watching that one, and it was just like the territory's going to freaking turn around, and it did. You know, and there's other angles like that. You know, Flair and Dusty in the cage, when they all beat on Dusty in the cage, and, you know, just different angles. You know, I mean, Hogan and Andre didn't take a genius to figure that out. That was an easy one. But, you know, so I had that feel, but then the thing is, it's just different because it's, you know, the Impact, you know, it's not a lot of viewers on Impact, and AEW, you know, while it's very successful based on the business that we're in and the times that we're in, as far as numbers of viewers, it's not a gigantic number, you know, like the number of viewers that used to watch wrestling. I mean, it's nothing close. It's just a different world. It can't be, you know, it's, so like, I don't know what anything can do as far as, you know, how big or how much it can turn things around and things like that. But I know it was really good, and it was about, I mean, the one thing is with the angle is that it's different, and there's a lot of different ways you can go. I mean, like on Impact, you know, it's like we're almost. I mean, we've got to be getting Kenny Omega and Rich Swann, which I know it's like Rich Swann's not like this household name superstar, but it is like, you know, title versus. I think we're going to get that title versus title, and they kind of gave the idea that Omega's going to be a belt collector. I don't know how many he can get, but, you know, I mean, it's going to be AAA and AEW, and I don't know what, you know, I wouldn't be surprised to see Impact as well, and you know, certain programs happening and things like that. I mean, it looks promising. It looks interesting. The negative I'll say about watching Dynamite tonight, I mean, there was too much on this show. I mean, like, it was crammed, but it's so much that when it's over, it's like, I don't know. You know, like the Sting thing and the Shaq thing and the Omega thing, it's almost like, to me, it's like, that should be it. It should have just been that.
Well, let me say one thing about that, because I thought the exact same thing. So last week was Winter's Coming, and they were doing AEW title match, and they did a title change, and we had the Sting debut, and they figured it was going to be huge, and so it's like, okay, you decided you were going to shoot a bunch of angles on the show. This week, I'm sure the feeling was, okay, this is the follow-up to Sting. Everybody's going to be tuning in. Let's shoot all those angles. So I'm not going to freak out yet, but if this same thing happens next week, I mean, we're getting to the point here where if every show is like this, it's going to start being like, it's Crash TV. And Crash TV works in the short term, and then it crashes in the long term. This is an unsustainable level of stuff happening on a show, I feel. But for 2 weeks...
But I mean, the thing is like, when the show's over, and granted, I'm in like not the greatest state of mind, but usually when the show's over, it's like there's certain things to focus on, and to me, so much of it got lost because there was so much. I mean, it was crammed to the point where, I mean, you could see like they lessened time into your introductions. I'm guessing just by watching the show that the Shaquille thing came up at the last minute, because if you notice, the only plugs for the Shaquille thing, Shaquille O'Neal thing, was a Tony Schiavone plug early in the show, which was clearly not done when they voiced over the show. So if they voiced it over last week, because it was taped on Thursday of last week, most of the show, it appears, because you never had JR talking about it, you never had Excalibur talking about it, that they didn't know. So it was one of those things where they got, Shaq, and I think I even said it earlier when we were running down the show on Monday. It's like when you can get Shaq, it's like that's when you get Shaq. You know what I mean? It's like it's not on, you don't pick the day, he's going to pick the day, and it just happens to be this day when you have so much already lined up that you're already advertised. So, there was that, but it's like,
it's like two different ends of the spectrum. We had 10 things advertised for AEW. Right. We had one thing announced for NXT. It feels like there should be a happy medium where maybe there's like five things announced, and then you do 5 important things instead of 10 important things.
Well, I mean, the thing is with the AEW, it's not even that they had all that stuff. I mean, they did have all that stuff announced, but they did angles in all those matches, and then they did the backstage angle with like the Jade Cargill thing, and then the Brandy Rhodes throwing the drink into Shaq, which actually I thought was kind of cute in its own way. But it was just so much. The Sting thing was interesting. I mean, it's like they very much didn't tip their hand on the Sting thing, but I mean, I guess that there's something with Sting and Darby trying to make a connection, which I think is great for Darby Allin for sure. So the Omega Callis thing was very similar to the night before. I mean, very good again. And then at the end, I mean, it's like they set up a 14-man tag team match for next week. I mean, it's crazy. There's some good wrestling tonight. I mean, I did not see NXT. I only saw AEW. I'll watch NXT in the morning if I can. My life is kind of dependent on other things right now. I don't know what I'm going to be watching and not watching over the next couple of days, but I'm going to try, so.
So obviously a lot of stuff is going on in wrestling, not the least of which is everything going on in Impact and at AEW. We'll get to Retro here in a moment, but Impact thoughts, the invasion, the Tony Khan commercial, all of that.
Well, to me, I get annoyed when everyone keeps calling it an invasion. It's like, it's not an invasion. And I thought, and again, I think that's what was good about the segments on Impact, is they made it clear that Kenny and Don are heels and both companies are baby faces. Because when you go to AEW, it's like Don Callis is, taking pot shots at Tony Khan, and it's like they, I don't like saying screwed because they just cheated, which is standard wrestling heel tactics, but they were heels and beat Mox for the title. But when they went to Impact, and I think this was the key to the Rich Swann segment, again, it may be leading to a match, but the key was Don Callis and Kenny Omega are snubbing Impact too. They're snubbing both companies because they're both just so fucking full of themselves that, we're not going to let Rich Swann come in. So I think it made it very clear that this isn't like Don and Kenny running off to Impact and there's going to be this invasion angle. There can be a degree of cross promotion. There can be guys on both shows, but it's like Don Callis is from Impact. Kenny is from AEW. They're in cahoots. Love that word. And they're a heel in both places because they're both just so goddamn full of themselves, cocky heels. I thought the promo segment on the bus was fantastic. I thought it was really, really good. I liked, again, I think the Rich Swann thing created interest in a potential match.
Got to be careful putting Don over too much. You know how his head gets.
Yeah, although I'll get the other thing later, but I thought it was really great. And the Tony Khan commercial bit, I laughed. And a lot of people think it's like, I don't like comedy, but it's like, I like things that are funny. I don't like when wrestling's treated like a joke. And I thought the Tony Khan thing worked really well too, in that if you're an AEW fan, I think the biggest criticism I heard on, was it Saturday? No, it was TV. It was Wednesday. The Wednesday show was, why is AEW, dealing with Impact? They're beneath them. And it's like, if you're a diehard AEW fan that feels that way, I think Tony Khan reflected that in his piece. He talked it down to them. It's like, I could buy them if I want to. I could stop them from doing this, but, I'll let them do that. And, they had the Tony Schiavone cheap shot, which was funny. But if there is such a thing, if there's a diehard Impact fan, it's like, then Tony comes off
there
like he's
definitely are.
Yeah. So it's like, they can look at Tony Khan as, man, you're a bit of a dick. You know what I mean? You're disrespecting us. And it's like, so people loyal to Impact can feel fired up and defensive of their company, and people that are loyal to AEW can be fired up and feel loyal to the company. And it's like, I think that's the key to and again, who I'm assuming there was a collaborative effort to a certain degree, but it's like, I think that's so far the brilliance of this is that the companies are baby faces to their fan base rather than making a company a heel. It's like the heels are Dawn and Kenny. And it's like, great, let's call them dickheads, especially Dawn, because it's easy. So it's like, I thought it was really good. And the way they did I bought commercial time, it's like, they could probably use a few extra bucks. It's like, it's funny if you're willing to laugh at it, but if you want to be a diehard Impact, it's like, you're a dick. And I thought it was funny, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought the promo, and the thing too, it's like Kenny's promo. Like Dawn, I expect to be a great promo, as much as I hate to admit it. But it's like, I thought Kenny's was a good promo too. And, they took a few pot shots at a few things, and I thought it was really good.
What about Rich Swann?
Well, again, Rich is a really talented guy, and I think too. It's like I have no idea if they're. I can't fathom them doing a title for title match, but I think it was just a way to create interest, to create buzz, and just disrespect the top babyface in Impact as a way of making it clear that this isn't Dawn Impact VP invading AEW. It's like, no, it's Don Callis, who's an Impact EVP, who's just a dickhead that's conspired with Kenny Omega, and he's going to snub Rich Swann as much as he's going to snub Jon Moxley. It was great. I really enjoyed it.
Did you watch the rest of AEW this week?
I did. For me, it's just too busy. And I mentioned that again last week, but I also added the addendum last week but if it works, and if, again, the kids today like a show that's busy, then it's like, great. And the numbers certainly supported it. They went up. And if they can continue to do so, then maybe this is the pace that works right now. Like, again, for me, it's just a little too much. And again, that might just be a generational thing, but the 50 plus, I'm just plus, but I'm technically plus, may not be the demographic you target your show for. So we will see if
I want to say one thing here very quickly. When you talk about all of the stuff that was going on, I mean, that's not okay. So there was a lot going on the show. And I don't necessarily think that having 8 million things in all of these segments is why the number was so good. I think the number was so good because, number one, it felt really hot coming off the Winter is Coming show. You had a new champion, you had the Impact Wrestling tie-in, you had Sting. People tuned in, and you the Shack, you also had 10 things announced, okay? So if you add in everything that happened after the match, everything that happened during the match, there was like 25 things that happened on the show. So I feel it would have done largely the same number with 15 things happening on the show. Does that make sense? Like when somebody in the middle of the match starts arguing with somebody who's on the other side of the barricade, I mean, that's not why the show did almost 1 million viewers. The show would have done exactly the same if you would have taken that out, for example. If you had one less brawl after a match, the show's not going to do 800,000 viewers. No
one was going to switch to NXT because 10 of the Dark Order didn't shove Aaron Solo.
Sure.
Yeah, there was, and again, that's probably a match that's a good example in that you had Dustin and 10, and you had the new kid, I don't remember his name, sorry, that came out with Dustin as a new member of the Nightmare Family. It's like, oh, that's something in addition to this match. And then 10 did the shoving push thing with Aaron Solo. And again, Aaron's a former student of mine, a big fan of his. But there's a second thing in addition to this just being a match. And then you had the Dark Order offer for Dustin to become 7 again. So it was like there was 3 additional things to that match in one segment. So again, it seems a bit much, but again, the show's got momentum going in the right way. So it's like I'm not going to complain too much about it.
Because the show's good. Like there's too much stuff. There was too much stuff for me on that show.
Me too.
But it didn't make it a bad show. It's not like it was a bad show and there was so much stuff and nothing made sense. Like everything makes sense. And everything that they did, all of the extra stuff they did, it is going somewhere. It is leading to something. So I didn't feel like it was a heavy negative, but I felt if you keep doing this every week, like eventually it's going to be too much. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it's the big difference. I remember you mentioned it on Observer Live today that, people was like, oh, he's calling it a Russo show. It's like, no,
it was not a fucking Russo show.
There's a big difference between 15 shitty things being done on a show and 15 good things being done on a show.
Yeah, I mean, Russo
I might prefer 8 good things on a show rather than 15, but there wasn't the complete absurdity of, like, what the hell was that?
Every time Russo did a restart show, they weren't all good, because I actually went back and watched them. I remembered that all of the restart shows were good, and there were some restart shows that were actually fucking terrible. But every time he did a show like that, there were a million things that happened. And because it was a restart show, it wasn't like things didn't make sense because you were starting over again. Nothing had a chance to not make sense yet. So it's not like those shows were bad. Sometimes they were very exciting. But then when he followed it up, he didn't know what he was doing, and it was nonsensical and stupid. It's not inherently bad to have too many things going on, but if you do a show like that every single week, at some point it's like what you want to be important isn't going to be seen as important because there's so many things going on that things get lost in this shuffle. And to me, if something's really important and big, I mean, that should be the thing that's talked about throughout the show as opposed to, well, that's the big thing for this segment, but there's so many other things coming on during the show that we barely have time to even think about that thing that happened an hour ago.
Yeah, because that's the one thing in hindsight after I watched it, because when they announced the big Tony's going to talk to Sting ahead of time, and then right before, I don't remember, a day or two before, they did the Tony's going to talk to Shaq, and I'm like, oh, Tony's got 2 big interviews, that seems like a lot, and I remember Dave mentioning that, well, when you get Shaq, you got to deal with it. But the fact that it was a backstage film segment, I wonder, and again, maybe there's a timetable and a plan that they needed to, but it's like, I couldn't help but think it's like that could have been next week just as easy as not. And I still think that would have been a great number this week. You could have done the Tony Sting segment. And then on this show, you could have said that Tony is going to sit down with the Shaq next week, because it did seem having 2 big Tony interviews in one show seemed to be a lot. So, and God, does Shaq look gigantic when he sits in a regular chair.
By the way, we have matches for Impact coming up tomorrow. Kenny Omega returns to Impact. Kiera Hogan and Tasha Steelz versus Rosemary and Taya. Semifinals of the Knockouts Tag Team Title Tournament. Carl Anderson versus Chris Sabian. That should be good with Alex Shelley. Manic, the new X Division champion, who managed to be in 2 places at one time on Saturday. He was one of many that did that. He'll be facing Chris Bay. And Fallout from Turning Point. So that's your lineup for Impact on Tuesday night.
You switched up your Kip with your Chris right there.
What are you talking about?
Saban.
Yeah,
Chris Saban.
Chris Saban.
One Sabian.
Yeah, Chris Saban. That's what I said.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Impact talk just like that all of a sudden. Look at that. You excited for Kiera Hogan?
You know what, Mike?
Chris Bay?
You may be in for a big surprise.
Oh, boy. Can't wait.
I'll remember you said that. All right, so an interesting trivia tidbit for today. We had an Impact show, and we had a Super J Cup, and we had a Triple Mania, 3 different shows.
They were all supposed to be live, but the only one that was really live was Triple Mania. The other ones were fake because we had guys on. We had Leo Rush was at Triple Mania, and he was at the live Super J Cup.
He was there. We had Kenny Omega at Triple Mania and Impact.
Yeah.
We had TJP at the Super J Cup and Impact.
And Chris Bay.
And Chris Bay. So all of those people worked 2 different shows on the same night.
Yeah, I had known about like that, like the Big Rick Rude night, but it was like more than like I didn't know about Leo Rush until tonight. Because Leo Rush was under a mask. He was Spider-Man, Arachnaman, in the Marvel Comics match, and he was all covered up. But Leo Rush
and TJP also under a mask.
Where was TJP?
For the Impact show.
Oh, did he? Because I didn't see the Impact show.
Yeah. He won the
they were teasing that on TV that he was going to come in under a mask as the Midnight Rider.
Yes, they pretty much pulled off that whole angle, so he won the X Division title.
Wow. So with Omega, what did they set up the match? Because they're going to announce on Tuesday Kenny Omega match.
They did a segment on the bus because it was taped the same day, I guess, that they did that other interview that aired on Impact.
So that was Saturday of last week.
So him and Callis are on the bus, and Carl Anderson walks in. And, they're all reminiscing about the olden days. Everything is great, and they're all being gimmicks. And then Carl Anderson says, I'd love to sit here and do this all night, but I got to do something I don't want to do. I got to work. I got to wrestle tonight. Kenny goes, what? You got to wrestle? Who are you wrestling? And Carl says, Ethan Page. And Callis goes, Ethan Page, you can beat that guy in 2 minutes. You'll be right back here for happy hour.
Ethan Page isn't even wrestling anymore.
He was on this show.
Yeah, so this was taped weeks ago because Ethan Page was in contact with the person on the roster who tested positive for COVID and said he wasn't going to be wrestling anymore.
Yes.
Because his contract is expiring with Impact. So Ethan Page is pretty much done. So this was probably taped. The bus itself was taped Saturday, but the matches were probably taped weeks ago.
Sure. So Cal says, you could beat this guy in 2 minutes, and Carl says, well, it's probably going to take more than 2 minutes. And Kenny says, what are you talking about? The 2012 Carl Anderson, he'd run through this guy. And Callis goes, yeah. And they're all on him for not beating this guy in 2 minutes. And Carl says, you guys ribbing me? They say, no, but go out there and they get him all fired up, and he goes out there and he ultimately beats Ethan Page. But that was a segment.
If the guy's leaving the territory.
Yes, that was a segment there on the bus. So
no run-ins or nothing like that.
No.
He couldn't do a run-in because it was weeks ago, unless, it was all in secret. I guess he could have, but.
So then we obviously had Triple Mania, which you saw.
So Omega will be on Impact again on Tuesday. He will be on Dynamite on Wednesday in an ODQ match with Joey Janela, where the storyline is because remember they were supposed to wrestle in the tournament, but Joey Janela had contact with somebody with COVID, so he was pulled from the show. So that's when Kenny Omega beat Sonny Kiss in a minute or 5 seconds or whatever it was with a one knee real quick. So they're redoing that one. So that's the deal there.
Impact announced Omega and the Good Brothers versus Rich Swann and Motor City Machine Guns for their January pay-per-view. So
Impact was back. It wasn't okay. Well, so here's the thing: the first week of Kenny Omega, obviously they did their best numbers of the year, and they did the thing of last week. That Impact is that the 18 to 49 numbers were almost like because Impact is the oldest skewing of all the shows, older than NXT even. But last week's Impact was younger skewing than any show but AEW. So there was a complete change in the audience. Now this week it was back down to normal. I mean they dropped from what was it 0.08 to a 0.04. So essentially in real numbers, they dropped from about 98 to 50, I think. I don't have the number exactly this week of, as far as the 1849 number. Last week was 98. And this week, was probably half of that. So, and the audience didn't drop in half. So what happened is that Kenny Omega audience that came, for the most part, they came to see Kenny Omega last week, but they watched the whole show for the most part, which is good. I mean, that's a good sign, but they didn't come back this week. And I think that I don't know what the plan is for all of this. Again, a lot depends on the storyline. I mean, my gut tells me that Omega should not be on Impact every week. He should be on maybe once a month or so. But, if they have the right storyline, maybe he should be on every week. But I don't know what that is. They're going to do a 6-man tag. I mean, it's something. It's something for the pay-per-view. It's something new. I would presume you're building to Omega and Swan, which Omega and Swan should be a great match. It should be the biggest match you could possibly do in Impact. So I think that match should be something. So, you're not going to get like monster numbers every week, but it's something. And they're still up from normal. but not that far up.
So last night on Impact, Tony Khan did another one of his little advertisements with Tony Schiavone. And in fact, they issued an open invitation to anybody from Impact to show up on AEW television. Now, AEW taped last week, and I didn't hear anything about anybody from Impact being on the show. Now, that doesn't mean they weren't, because Impact taped, and they got Kenny Omega and Don Callis on the show by putting them in a bus. So there's plenty of stuff that they could have taped backstage involving Impact wrestlers on AEW. I don't know if it's happening tonight, but Tony Khan did say tonight, this week, or any week. So I can tell you, I have no inside information. I only know from watching this show for a year. If Tony Khan goes on Impact and says that Impact people are coming to AEW, they are. I don't know if it's going to be tonight. I don't know if it's going to be next week, but there's an invasion coming. And I would not be surprised if they did some sort of backstage deal tonight and you actually see some Impact guys. Maybe it'd be the Good Brothers. I don't know who it's going to be. But that would not surprise me in the slightest for that to kick off tonight. If not, I think it's going to kick off on the next live show. So we shall see. Very exciting.
Hey, look, that's the one thing you can do. You know, you don't have to have it in the ring. It could be a bunch of ass kicking backstage that, you know, can be done at any time, be taped at any time, be inserted at any time. So they do have that advantage going for them. But Good Brothers, there's going to be a lot of people. It seems like a lot of people on their social media are tweeting up things. I can't remember if it's Chris Bay there, but I've seen a couple of them. Who could be invading? Who could show up down there in AEW? We'll see. And who knows if it's just on Dynamite or if we possibly see people show up on Dark, too, for that matter. It's a long enough show, for heaven's sakes. They could get something done.
Back in a moment with more, everybody. Wrestling Observer Live. All right, we're back in the show. Bryan Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. Mike Sempervive, also of WrestlingObserver.com. I have one more thing that I want to read here, and then we're going to go to feedback, but no calls today, mostly because I forgot to set it up. But you can text us, 425-780-7566. That's actually my Christmas present to all of you on the chat. No calls.
Thank you.
Yeah, but that's going to end after Christmas. Don't get used to it. On Wednesday, this was yesterday, actually it's today, Impact and Access announced 3 days of programming that will lead into their January 16th Hard to Kill pay-per-view. That's the show with Omega and the Young Brothers, or the Good Brothers, versus Rich Swann, young Rich Swann. Forget it. Anyway, so we got following the Impact show.
He seized up everybody.
I'll just read it all. On Tuesday, January 12th, Access is going to air Bound for Glory, starting at 4 Eastern. The October 24th pay-per-view featured Rich Swann winning the title, Su Yung winning the Knockouts title, The North winning the tag titles, and a cinematic match between Moose and EC3. Following that night's Impact at 10 Eastern will be Impact in 60, a show that, quote, puts a spotlight on some of the most unforgettable matches and moments from across Impact's rich history, including those from the past year. On Thursday, January 14th, Access is going to air Impact Wrestling This Is Hard to Kill, a countdown-style show featuring several of the talents on the pay-per-view. Now, let's talk about the main event. On Friday, January 15th, as I attempt to not sneeze here.
It is Martin Luther King Day.
I'm building up this announcement. On Friday, January 15th, Access will air back-to-back showings of Badass Movie Night with the Good Brothers, Kickboxer. You guys remember that movie?
A lot of them don't.
One of the most god-awful movies ever made. Jean-Claude Van Damme in Kickboxer. This is going to start at 8 Eastern. Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson will be doing Mystery Science Theater 3000 commentary on Kickboxer. Now, whatever you think about Talkin' Shop-A-Mania, the matches, everything about it, to me, the best thing about Talkin' Shop-A-Mania is when Gallows and Anderson do commentary on the matches. It's the greatest. Now, granted, that's on pay-per-view, so they drink and they swear, and they're not going to be able to do that on Access TV, I don't think. I'm sure they can get away with a little bit of swearing, but they're going to drink and watch this movie and do commentary. I mean, this is going to be high in the running, I believe, for the best thing in wrestling in 20. I could be wrong, but based on what I've seen of them doing commentary on Talkin' Shop-A-Mania, and them watching along with one of the worst martial arts movies I ever saw, that's money right there. So if you want to watch it, it's Friday, January 15th, 8 p.m. Eastern. Badass movie night with the Good Brothers, Kickboxer. You'll be able to watch that with them in all of its glory.
Man, Mystery Science Theater meets movies for guys who like movies. I think when Raw initially started on Paramount or TN, what the hell was it called at the time? What did they turn it into? The Spike Network? Wasn't the Kickboxer one of the movies that they would play there? So they're fantastic. So them just completely playing the dozens on this movie and cracking jokes about it the entire time probably will end up being pretty good. There's somebody, though, that's just looking at that on Fridays going, you know what, we would really love to have New Japan and some MMA back on Friday nights on Access, but...
you're going to get martial arts back on Friday nights on Access, baby, with Kickboxer.
With Van Damme movies. Who else could we have besides, what was it, Cynthia Rothrock? We could get her out there. Jeff Speakman, The Human Weapon. They could break out all the old movies and get the rights to them.
Well, here's what I know. Somebody says it's not even his worst movie. It may not be, but here's what I can tell you, okay? When I was a kid, I loved the movie Bloodsport. Like, it predated UFC, but it was basically UFC, but it was like BS UFC. And I loved that movie, and I watched that movie over and over and over again. That's why I started Taekwondo, if I recall correctly. But anyway,
Wow.
Years later, I watched the movie, and like the acting is atrocious. I mean, it's beyond atrocious. The karate, the martial arts, is actually a really fun movie when they're in there fighting and everything like that. It's the acting is horrible, but when I watch it years later, it's not that bad a movie. It's actually a fun movie, okay? But when I watched it as a kid, and I thought it was great, well, I found out that Van Damme had done another movie, Kickboxer. I watched it. I thought it sucked. So I can only imagine how horrible it must have been. It's like I used to love The Ultimate Warrior, but, back then I thought Dino Bravo sucked. I go back and I watch Dino Bravo, and God rest his soul, but he pretty much sucked. But I thought Warrior was good. Now I look back at Warrior, so you can imagine how bad Kickboxer. You get that analogy? That MMA math? Anyway.
The Ultimate Warrior being akin to action star movies, kind of close, Ultimate Warrior might be able to beat up some guys. Sure, Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal could. But then you actually had real martial artists, as you would find out later on, who would just kill all of them, and probably a lot closer to the Ultimate Warrior, some of these folks, than actual martial artists are. But yeah, there you go. So are you going to be going out of your way to, because I know you have trouble watching Access.
Oh wait, hold on.
This
guy here says, I took a screenwriting class with the guy who wrote Kickboxer. Well, I hope he was in the audience and not teaching it.
Did he fail?
I've got Access, by the way.
Okay.
I have Sling TV and YouTube TV. I bought both because I needed access to watch New Japan on Access. And then New Japan stopped being on Access. I still have Sling.
Why couldn't you actually contact someone at Access to get access to Access so you wouldn't have to access two services?
Bro,
and waste your time paying for two?
I have a 4-year-old who loves dinosaurs, and she can only watch Dinosaur World on Sling. There's certain things that I can only watch on Sling that I can't watch on YouTube TV. And she's found out about it, so now Sling TV is in the household.
What channel does that come on that only Sling
There
has?
aren't channels on Sling TV. You just look up History Channel or whatever. There's no History Channel on YouTube TV.
There's no channels on Sling TV?
Well, not channels. It's not like, turn it to channel 32 on Sling. No, you just look for whatever the name of the channel is. Or you just use a search bar, and it comes up. You are so old sometimes, dude. Kenny Omega is going to be on next week's episode of Impact. They announced yesterday Omega and the Good Brothers would be appearing. He's been making appearances on Impact's programming since winning the AW title earlier this month. So here is what has been announced for the January 5th Impact appearance by the Good Brothers and Kenny Omega. Sami Callihan versus Eddie Edwards. Moose versus Matthew Palmer in a last 3 minutes challenge match. Jordan Grace and Jazz versus Navi and Havoc in a Knockouts Tag Team Tournament semifinal. And many more. I presume at some point there's going to be Impact folks going to AEW. I don't think it's going to be tonight. But I would not be surprised that sometime over the next couple of weeks that starts to